how do you think women, when they come into leadership positions for these kind of innovative solutions, can lead deep tech in India?
Innovation does not have to be in the fancy lab, right? It can be grassroots, and that makes a difference.
She's a gold medalist in mass communication, an environmental scientist, and a sustainability advocate whose work embodies purpose and impact. She continues to champion environments where individuals and ideas can thrive. What is your vision with GHCI 2025? I know the theme is Unbound.
Yes.
Which speaks volumes, but what does it speak to you?
Unbound is about accessing all of you. Parts of you that you have neglected, parts of you you've not invested in for your growth. I believe that the minute you're unbound, you will make that investment in yourself.
Even though today they form 30 to 36% of the technology workforce, we still see very scarce numbers when it comes to leadership.
Women in leadership can only transform when they go deep within themselves. Now, why does that happen? One is, of course, barriers to leadership entry. Two is...
What is your perspective on one of the inner narratives that women have that they need to unlearn to be able to lead businesses today?
Gender has no role to play internally. Now, when you look at that deeply, you recognize that women's participation is partly societal and it's partly internalized. So the first work that most women need to do is to unlearn that conditioning and is to let that go. The masculine and the feminine are not genders, they are archetypes. It's like a toolbox. And that is the shift that people need to make. Because if you and I can do it, Shreya, anybody can do it.
Imagine a journey that moves seamlessly between media, science, and leadership, and that lands at the heart of the most critical conversations of today: inclusion. Welcome back to Build With Shreya, where ideas and stories inspire you to build something extraordinary. Joining me today is Shreya Krishnan, who is the Managing Director of Anita B. Org India, the organization that has been serving technologists since 2003, envisioning a future where diverse innovators shape technology to reflect the societies they serve. Through their programs and partnerships, they foster growth, learning, and inclusion, promoting equitable workspaces, inclusive cultures, thriving talent and technologies that benefits local communities and broader societies at large. In today's conversation, we learn how Shreya's experience and leadership are reshaping innovation, technology, and AI, and how building equitable and inclusive workspaces serves as a strategic advantage, ensuring that innovation is not only accessible and sustainable, but also leads towards a purposeful growth. So let's dive in and see how Shreya Krishnan is turning purpose into policy and ideas into action. So Shreya, it's lovely to have you on Build With Shreya.
Super excited. I think back in the day when Vikas, I think, was the person who connected us, and looking at your journey itself, right? The kind of storytelling that you lean into, your own presence at Grace Hopper as a speaker, and this year's collaboration. It's been a year plus now and it's going strong. So I'm very excited about the potential possibilities and what we'll unlock as we go along.
And today we are going to dive into your journey.
Yes.
So when we talk about your professional journey, you started with environmental science, and then you went into leading communications and brand strategy. I'm really enamored by your vision there. So what were those moments which led you to see, okay, like communications is the future for you, and that can really help you become the transformational voice for different organizations?
So I think early on when I started my environmental sciences, I was very clear, being very young, that I wanted to work in impact. So that was a very clear choice of saying, okay, I'm going to do environmental sciences. I did journalism and media studies. I wanted to be an environmental journalist, documenting climate change around the world. But life had different plans for me. So from there started this. My first job was as a journalist for the Hindu, right? So I started out as a journalist, and that was the whole context that I was planning on going after. But then I did work with United Nations Environment Program. I worked with Center for Environmental Education. I did a whole bunch of things with, Environment Support Group back in the day in Bangalore. And when I sort of traversed through all of that, I think I also realized the power of voice. I was also parallelly the cultural secretary at college. I was also speaking at a lot of events. I also had a lot of those kind of myriad skills that came together. And when I realized the power of combining impact with storytelling, and to be very honest, back in the day, journalism didn't pay very well, right? So you did have to find a career that sort of held you. But what I think became a constant with my career was impact roles in all of the organizations that I was in. CSR would end up with me, DEI would end up with me somehow, right? So it always sort of leaned into my impact side. And when I look at science and storytelling, I think there's so much power in being able to lean into, and I joke that, I talk about technology so much and all of that. I've been in spaces with so many techies in the room. I'm not a techie myself, but to just be able to understand what technology holds and the power that it has to transform is in itself so much science. But when you're able to tell those stories through the medium of communication, through the medium of data, then it sort of combines the two worlds very beautifully. And I think that's what I see coming together with my experience.
How do you weave together your drive for environmental advocacy with inclusion on a personal level?
So I think there's a beautiful Ban Ki-moon quote which says, the fight for climate is no different from the fight for gender, is no different from the fight against war. Mm-hmm. So he says all of these issues are connected. And the more I have worked in conscious environmental activism and gender activism as a voice, I recognize that ESG is not different from DEI. They're very deeply integrated, right? The minute you look at climate problems, the biggest impact is on women and children. The minute you look at war, the biggest impact is on women and children. Economic shifts, when you look at mindsets changing, when you look at politics, all of the negative impacts are borne higher by women and children, right? So automatically there's a deep connect between the two worlds. So I've never seen them as two separate worlds. I see them as deeply integrated. The environment, social governance impact is so deep when it comes to DEI, when it comes to the landscape of what we're talking about, inclusion, or when we're looking at entrepreneurship or women representation in the workforce, they're all very, very connected. To give you an example, where there are more women on boards and where there's more participation of that gender in the workplace, you automatically have companies that are more aligned to the environmental. Because
surprising.
It's a direct correlation because automatically you have more sensitivity because you have a larger framework of people who think differently coming together to solve for problems of the world, right? So when you look at bringing these different kind of voices together, it automatically gives you a better landscape to solve for solutions. So problem solving becomes easier, ideas become more wider, nurturing comes in as not the feminine or the masculine, but as an essential need for us to build organizations that are conscious about the planet. And that automatically leans into being more ethical, being more organic and sustained in the way growth is looked at. So automatically all of these lean into better performance. So it's not even just environmental, it's also deeply economic.
And right? So, it totally ties into like a genuine global progress, if you want to see, for sure. And if you talk about one more aspect of your personal journey, you've been crowned the Mrs. India World 2017 and Miss India Empowerment 2024. Leading beauty with purpose, and also co-authored a book called Words That Matter, the language that girls should genuinely learn to speak. So what is your perspective on one of the inner narratives that women have that they need to unlearn to be able to lead businesses today?
So I think firstly the fact that gender has no role to play internally. Right? For instance, if you take out the conditioning that we've all grown up with, and if we look at women's participation in the workforce, and the numbers give you the same story, right? You're automatically able to tell when women fall off the workforce, when they become primary caregivers, and then they realize either for their children or the elders in the family. So there's a deeply linked association in the way we're raised as girls around the world. And this is not specific to India. It's probably more intense in its expression in India. But around the world, except for the Nordic countries, I think most countries have a very huge gender barrier or a gender gap. And it manifests as pay parity, it manifests as access to capital, it manifests as access to education, to healthcare. It's across the board. Now, when you look at that deeply, you recognize that women's participation is partly societal and it's partly internalized, right? So, the first work that most women need to do to access their entire breadth of what they're able to bring to the table as leaders, as business people, as entrepreneurs, is to unlearn that conditioning and is to let that go, because that conditioning is what is informing you of your limitations, and those limiting beliefs are not yours, they've been instilled into you, right? The masculine and the feminine are not genders, they're archetypes. It's like a toolbox, right? Being assertive, being aggressive, being ambitious, being confident, none of these have gender. But when we understand it, and that's the book, right? Words Matter is about removing the lens of gender from words that we describe as masculine or feminine. What if we were to look at it as a toolkit for both men and women? Imagine the freedom of range and access that both men and women would have as leaders if they could operate with understanding the masculine and the feminine as just behaviors and actions and tools that they could use to be better leaders. It automatically makes a difference in the way they show up as leaders. And that is the shift that people need to make. So, if the question is, what can women do? I think the first step is to unlearn it. Because if you and I can do it, Shreya, anybody can do it. And that's because we're constantly rewiring our approach to the world around us.
And
And we're not,
and I think even while we are in this conversation, even though I've tried to do my best, and in sort of doing well in business and unlearning those things, while I'm having this conversation with you, I'm getting enlightened with what more I can unlearn,
Yeah.
to better my steps and actions towards better leadership.
Yeah, and there's enough data and research to show, right? Women will apply for a role only if there's a 90 to 100% match versus their resume, versus the men will apply for it with a 30 to 40% match, right? Women lose pay every time they have a child. Men gain 7 to 9% of salary, right? So it's deeply intrinsic, and the systemic barriers and our internal barriers together make it really huge to fight. But imagine you equipped yourself very strongly with the way to deal with this, not in terms of your gender, but as an individual, and brought your entire range of strengths to the table. Your navigation of that world becomes very, very different. That's why, although we're in the same world, we all sort of have different journeys and trajectories, because it's deeply linked to what your idea of yourself is and your identity is.
Leading Anita B. Org in India, you're advancing the participation of women and allies in technology. And even though today they form 30 to 36% of the technology workforce, we still see very scarce numbers when it comes to leadership.
Yeah.
If for our audience who do not know what Anita B is trying to create as an impact, if you can tell us a little bit about what is your vision with what it wants to do with the careers of underrepresented community in India, that'll be great. Maybe talk about a few programs that are
Absolutely.
actively there. Yeah.
So, AnitaB.org is a US not for profit, and in India, we've been around since 2003. We did have a break when COVID hit, and we restarted again in 2023. And I think our work primarily looks at advancing careers, right? To ensure that the technology that is built also has the people that it's being built for building it. So you need to have representation when you're designing, when you're ideating, when you're creating, because technology that's able to access markets that it didn't before can happen only when you have those different minds at the table. Right? So I think our work is fundamentally designed in looking at careers holistically, looking at allyship with a very, very powerful lens of what allyship can really do when it's well intended and when it's meant for the communities in such a way that it nurtures not just the organization, but also the product or the service that it's going to put out into the world, right? Not just the entrepreneur, but the entire ecosystem of entrepreneurs that it nurtures. So the work we do pans across, of course, the Grace Hopper celebration, which is our largest flagship event, which is coming up in December, 2nd to 4th in Bangalore. But it also looks at deep investment in women leadership, right? We do something called Empower Her. We look at deep allyship-based training programs for allies to show up better, to understand how performance can really be nurtured through creating teams that are cohesive, that are working together very seamlessly as a dynamic. Right? So we do advisory and consulting and returnship and apprenticeship pathways, and our programs are across the board. We work with academia and students because we want to have girls in STEM, sort of grow into women in STEM. We work with organizations because we believe that leadership trajectories can be so much more. Like, for instance, India has a better number at the entry period because US is around 26 to 28%. In India, it's much higher. It's 38%, right? Women in tech. But then as it grows, it drops to 14% at the VP level.
Yeah.
Right? And then you go higher, it's 8%. Then you go higher at the CEO level, it's at 4%, 3 to 4%. Right? So that's the decline. Now, why does that happen? One is, of course, barriers to leadership entry. Two is a very intrinsic need for most women when they become caregivers, either to their parents or in-laws or children. There is a certain belief that it must be them that's involved, right? So you're talking about mental load, you're talking about menopause, you're talking about perimenopause, you're talking about, look at the biological clock. I'm menopausal right now. I'm 40 plus menopausal, leading an organization of this scale. And it does take a toll on you because the work schedules, the work days are designed for 24-hour schedules, whereas women's bodies and women's health are very different in terms of the design, right? So we don't have workplaces that have been crafted to sort of lean into that.
That's true.
So there is pressure and stress, and a lot of women also come with the conditioning that I want to be the primary caregiver for my children, right? So they take a step back. So even if they may be working, even if promotions open up for them, they may not choose to take the promotion because they say, no, I'm happy where I am, right? But are you really happy where you are because you are happy, or because this is what you've conditioned to be believing in, right? It shows that children with working mothers perform that much better, right? They understand the world better. There is a certain relationship that comes with that. But we penalize women on both sides. We penalize them at home as primary caregivers and people who have the burden of carrying that mental load. And we also penalize them at the workplace because pay parity doesn't exist, because barriers to entry, there are assumptions, preconceived notions, and biases that are already playing. So we often don't even give the woman the choice, right? We assume that she may not want to take it. Yeah. So some of the things that we do with allyship is to really encourage people to allow the choice to rest with the person on the other side and not based on their gender. So it should not ideally be gender-based. So we do a lot of sensitization programs around that. And personally, I believe very strongly that women in leadership can only transform when they go deep within themselves. I think it's a lot of work around psychology and patterns and behaviors.
It is a lot of, I used a lot of meditation.
Yeah.
So personally,
Exactly.
different tools are there.
Absolutely. It is self-work,
Yes.
right? And only when you're well sort of equipped with who you are and all of the stress that you have to deal with, can you show up as a better leader, as a better parent, as anything that you're choosing to be. So I think the barriers to entry in our country are fewer as much as barriers to entry into leadership are higher. So that's the difference. Because at the beginning, at the workforce, you have a lot of fantastic minds. And as it goes up, it sort of starts, devolving. Yeah.
You spoke about, GHCI coming after 5 years last year.
Yeah.
And I was part of it. Earlier, I was part of a couple of events in Orlando, though. And
Yes.
that's why I was aware of Anita B. And when it was coming back in India,
Yeah.
I was very excited to be able to be there and contribute. So what is your vision with GHCI 2025? I know the theme is Unbound.
Yes.
Which speaks volumes, but what does it speak to you?
So I think, especially in the geopolitical landscape that we're in today, Unbound is about accessing all of you. Parts of you that you've neglected, parts of you you've not invested in for your growth, parts of you that you've quietened down and shut up, where your voice has not come out in the ways that it can. I think Grace Hopper is a platform that allows you to access learning, networking, growth in such a deeply holistic way. And I believe that the minute you're unbound, you will make that investment in yourself. You will put that money on the table for you to grow. right? This is a career transition phase. Anybody who comes to Grace Hopper takes back so much, right?
It's a celebration.
Yeah.
I don't think there is any. So I don't think there's any such platform that I've seen globally that is called a celebration.
Yeah.
It's either a conference or an exhibition, but here we're celebrating, and it's a lot more than just careers. It's again, as you said, the
Yeah.
first step is to internalize. The first step is to sort of unlearn those
Yes.
beliefs and those conditionings. And I think it starts with the very first sessions that we have at Grace Hopper.
Yeah.
So I totally relate to what you're
Yeah,
speaking to.
so the design is such, right? So we start with unbound conversations from women in super senior leadership from around the country who are, opening plenary keynotes, and you hear from CEOs and you hear from them. But then in the tracks, you hear from founders, you hear from people who have failed multiple times. You hear from people who are learning AI in the new world. You hear from people who are mothers trying to, grapple with the situations that they're dealing with. That's why it's a celebration, because it's a celebration of the spirit of the people, of the women, the allies, and the collective community that holds the tech community together. It is Asia's largest event. It is huge, and it gets the eyeballs that it does. But what I think is the magic of Grace Hopper is anybody who comes there finds something very powerfully transformative, right? Anybody who comes there goes back with something that's been an aha moment, or, it shows, right? A pre-Grace Hopper selfie and a post-Grace Hopper selfie. I keep saying this. It just leaves you with so much joy, because that energy of transformation, the energy of learning, the energy of collective growth, of unlocking career opportunities, all of that is happening in one place. And I think that's the beauty of being unbound, to unbound yourself to the abundance of opportunities that are available in the world, whether it's talking to somebody you never thought you would, or unlocking a conversation, or listening to somebody who's always inspired you and, going up to them and talking to them. I think there's just so much that happens at Grace Hopper. And so many people find home in themselves through the journey of the 3 days. I don't know how it happens, but it happens.
It does happen. I remember there was a talk by Bhumi
Yeah.
last year.
Yeah.
That was super inspirational as well.
Yeah.
So we learn these journeys from diverse people coming from diverse backgrounds,
Yeah.
and sort of aligning that into tech careers. I think it's a beautiful way it is weaved together.
Yeah.
And if I were to ask you around what it took to revive Grace Hopper India, because it was an event that drew like 7,000 plus attendees, and it did return to the overwhelming response that we saw last
Yeah.
year. So how was that journey like, and what do you see? What do you see 2025 like?
So I think last year's journey was interesting because it was bringing it back from scratch. And of course, last year we had a lot of partners because it's just different as a political year. This year is very different. This year, our partners are, in different ways, sort of the landscape has shifted. But there is interest. People are investing in themselves. There are entrepreneurs coming in. There are, partner organizations coming in. We have academia representation. So I think last year, while it was all about reviving it, this year is about creating an experience that goes deeper. This year is about ensuring that we have great content, and in every track, every session is being sort of very deeply looked at. There's a lot of jury work that's happened. Our executive council members, our jury members, they're all women in tech, right? Because our team is 12 people. But by extension, we have so many people involved in the collective growth that I'm very excited to see the way this year's shaping up, because it's very different from last year.
And I think as any person, an organization has its own journey.
Yeah.
And while it faced its hiccup during the COVID, it sort of got back, last year. So this year is a step ahead.
Yes.
And so for sure, looking forward to what it's like this year.
And to being unbound completely.
So how is Anita B India helping organizations operationalize inclusive product development? Things like bias audits, or fostering more academia and industry partnerships. So how is that sort of coming together?
So we do a bunch of programmatic interventions with our organizations, right? So I was telling you, we work with academia, we work with all of our Forward Together Pathways partners, and Pathways partners are Shiro's, Aspire for Her, Herky, the whole cosmos of parity consulting and interweave. And there's a whole plethora of Vigyan Shala and Tinker Hub. And, I can go on and on naming. There are over 45 plus partners. The idea of bringing them all under one roof is we see ourselves as enablers, right? And enablers in the ecosystem means, right, looking at technology as a way to solve for problems at the grassroots level. And India has massive representation. If we can sort of get this representation to spill over into ideation tables, if we can get young women and differently able people, minority communities, etc., to find a voice, to find a seat at the table, or if they don't have one, to make it and pull the chair and sit down and say, I'm here to share, right? How can we leverage individuals? How can we build organizations to start seeing it that way? How can we enable partners? How can we equip girls in STEM? And how do we use our community to make these conversations happen? I think that's the sort of pillars that we have that helps us drive at looking at technology by being human at the center. With AI, with the conversations around AI, with all of this intensity that's coming through, I think the magic and the power is to go human. And the more human you are, the more ethical the products are, the bigger your market scope is. Like, for instance, organizations that consciously have women in their leadership boards. I spoke about being more environmentally conscious. The more inclusive organizations also showcase 3% more in terms of profitability.
Wow.
Compared to their peers. And they show higher resilience when it comes to tough times, volatile times. Share markets hold up better when you have better representation, right? If you go back to looking at the way organizations are led by women in problems of turbulent times, you will see that they actually hold better grounding, right? So there is data, there is merit. This is not charity anymore. It's strategic business, right? So when you look at inclusion, when you look at belonging, it's very important to bring everybody who the product or the service is meant for to design it. And the more people you leave out, the more markets you're leaving out. It's as simple as that. So what percentage of markets do you want to capture? So it's not doing good. It's actually doing better for yourself as an organization by ensuring you're ethical and you're doing the right things and you're investing in ESG and you're investing in inclusion and belonging and all of these areas.
So one thing about getting to those tables, where you say, okay, I have something to share. Getting to those tables is one barrier.
Yeah.
The other is being the decision maker of what is discussed on the table.
Absolutely.
So what do you think will take to get there?
Day before yesterday, I was at a women's event meeting, and there was a woman who said, "No, I'm tired of men in the boardroom. When I say something, who don't say anything at all, and another guy will pick up exactly what I said and say it, and people will applaud him." Right? So I think you can only change workplaces when change starts in the society, in homes, and in families. Mm-hmm. And I keep coming back to this. It's deeply intrinsic to the way we behave as society, right? The more patriarchy and misogyny continue to perpetuate in our society, it'll also come into the boardrooms. It's the same people who are stepping into those spaces. It's the same ideas. Just because somebody walked into a workplace, it doesn't mean he thinks differently or she thinks differently.
I mean, ideally, if you talk about it, it's not about companies or business with business. It's always people with people.
Absolutely.
So it's all about person to person, one-on-one, ultimately.
Yeah.
They might have a label that they belong to XYZ organization, but they're people.
And the more work you do with people, the more you understand how nuanced this change has to be. Mm-hmm. And that's why I keep saying, equip yourself. Because a lot of times what is needed to make those decisions is for you to override this. The minute it's a trigger or a pattern, you'll go into a shell. That's what happens with most women or most minority communities, because they feel attacked or triggered and they feel like their voice has gotten away. Mm-hmm. I love this quote which says, "Courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is what you do despite that fear." And I think sometimes to be heard, if it means you have to raise your voice, mm-hmm. or you have to call attention to this bullshit that's being perpetuated as, the bro code culture, I think it needs to be broken. Mm-hmm. And also, I will call out the fact that there are a lot of women who are deeply patriarchal because they're designed
I agree.
They're designed to lean into the power of what patriarchy lends to them.
Absolutely.
Right? So they're taught to navigate patriarchy by being patriarchal themselves.
And perpetuate that further in
Exactly.
the society.
And it seems, and it comes very cast in the same garb of the masculinity and the aggression. And you actually, when you drop the aggression, because the aggression is coming from being triggered, when you stop letting the trigger impact you, and this is a personal learning for me, when I drop my voice, I'm heard more than when I raise my voice. Right? It's an automatic power shift, because now you're not screaming to be heard. You're leaning back and saying, if you want to listen to me, I'm going to drop my voice. You lean in. Right? So it's a simple shift. And this is, again, a personal reflection, right? For me, that's what's worked. And sometimes it's not the voice, it's the strength of the voice. It's not the tone of the voice, it's the strength of the voice. And it's your personal conviction that drives that. Right? So I think leadership needs to be governed by, yes, of course, compassion and empathy and all of that, but at the same time, a very sorted, secure, supported self. And that is when you're able to make those decisions, and that's when you're able to share without fear, and that's when transformation happens.
So long before purpose became a buzzword, you embedded CSR and social impact into a company's DNA. What is your piece of advice to organizations to look at social impact as a growth strategy rather than an afterthought?
Yeah. Firstly, like I said, it's economic, right? It's not charity anymore. It's very economic. It makes sense from a business sense perspective to actually invest in something like this, because automatically your profitability is higher, you're more resilient, all of that I shared. Secondly, when you really start with the intention of including everybody to speak their piece, there are many examples of this, right? I was laughing the other day because there was a 13-member team of a very payment-based, not really a startup, but a unicorn that was trying to design an entire application feature, etc., for women, and it was an all-male team. And the product didn't work. If you don't have people who it's being designed for in the room when it's being designed or created, you will automatically have a lot more steps of failure.
It's the same as, we are, let's say, so we do custom software development for clients, and we co-create with the clients because it is being built for them.
Yeah.
So it's the same way.
Yeah.
Like if you're not co-creating with people we are building for, it won't solve the problem that it is sought out to solve.
Absolutely. And that's exactly the context, right? The more you understand that when you have this representation, when you have the pessimist and the optimist, it's not just gender. Gender is one element, right? You need the disabled folks in the room. You need, the older people, because that's an entire generation.
Accessibility is a whole
massive issue, right? So when you look at all of these intersections, you're then able to build products that cater to all of these diaspora, which automatically increases your shareholder value, which automatically increases your market share and your capital. So there's so many benefits to it. So when I think about it, I think it makes business sense. And I think that's why, and it's strange, right? It's privileged to also see it from that lens, because I don't think a lot of people are informed about how powerful it is to really integrate this as a business strategy and not a tick in the box as a good to have.
So you connect equity and inclusion with ESG, making it sort of a measurable activity. Do you see inclusion actually becoming a measurable metric going forward, like carbon footprints or compliance for companies? And what kind of governance models or KPIs or incentives do you think companies can really have in place to propagate that going forward?
So when you look at inclusion, it's both cultural, it's normative cultural, and it's also progressive functional, right? What do I mean by that? Culture is a deep part of inclusion and belonging. The more people you have at the table, it's like that quote, right? Being invited to the party, then being able to dance at the party, and to actually dance at the party like no one's watching. Now
Right.
That's belonging, when you
Correct.
feel at home.
Yes.
And when you have that kind of an environment, you're naturally able to be at your best, because you're not putting filters on your authenticity or your genuineness. When I say authentic leadership or authentic representation, it means bringing all of you, with a very professional lens, which is added to it. So that's the whole cultural piece. Now, functional matrices of actually looking at progress, looking at numbers, if you were to map organizations' journeys over the course of years, and if you were to see which were the ones that adopted ESG as parameters, because governance and social is a very deep part of the whole diversity, equity, inclusion paradigm, right? Now, that, if it's intrinsically a part of the organization, you're naturally able to see the performance go up, right? So it's deeply interlinked. Now, when we look at the interlinks between both, I think the measurability is in how are your teams? Where are you hiring them from? Is there a representation in your team force that is, not just neurodivergence today, for instance, is a big aspect of it. There are so many neurodivergent people. 1 out of 3 people is in some form on the spectrum,
Yes.
right? So when you look at building for the world, why would you leave that money on the table? If you were to just be more intentional about bringing together people that would make things work. And I give this example to a lot of the founders that I coach. I'm like, don't do your ideation only with your tech team. Bring in the marketer, bring in the HR person, bring in even different thinking minds and background minds, not just gender, but bring in people who are exposed to different things, because automatically the richer your table is, the richer your product or service becomes. Right? So, can you build with everybody in the room? Sort of where is necessary? Because the going and building is a different process. But the ideation space, the more room it has, the better your outcomes will be.
Ideation and feedback.
Of
Because
course.
it's just a loop, right?
It's a complete
so I think,
loop.
that should be there. So you're also a certified NLP practitioner and a Gestalt therapist, and that's rare in corporate leadership. And it's not truly linked to strategy, but also around understanding human behavior. And how has that impacted your approach to how you mentor women, how you design these amazing programs to for inclusivity in the organization? Like, how has that impacted your approach overall?
I think deep transformation can only come when there is deep reflection. And I believe that, like I was telling you, the investment is first in the individual. If you want to change the culture of a team, you have to know the nuances of each of the people on that team to be able to sort of get the best out of them. I'm able to do that because I have a smaller team, so I can deeply invest. But I think my interest in psychology came in from trying to find the language to sort of articulate leadership in a much more behavioral science slash thought process thinking, from a neurology perspective, from the neurons and how they fire and how the body works. I think they're all deeply connected. It's not a separate, our body doesn't function separately from the mind, doesn't function separately from, so it's all deeply integrated. And I think my interest in psychology came because of that. And that's always helped me sort of be more patient in the process of building these programs. Because when you create a space of safety, especially psychological safety, you're able to allow people, and I deeply believe in circular leadership, which means that, it's not hierarchical. It's more around how do we come together as a community to solve for problems that are larger, and that leans into a lot of my work as well. So psychology helps you hold that space without the hierarchy. Because then it's no more about the titles that you hold. It's about what you can leverage in the room in the moment. It's about how you can push somebody to be their best. It's about helping somebody recognize what they're struggling with and working on that or with that to get them to go across. And I think it's also deeply nurturing to the self when you understand psychology, because you then know and you hold people accountable based on what is essential and not what is thrust on you by what you should be doing as a leader, right? You're a lot more empathetic and kinder. You're a lot more tuned in and clued in. You're also, it's not just nurturance, it's also very strategic, because it helps you navigate minds of people in a manner that they seem and feel and, understood at a deeper level. And then that transformation becomes a lot easier. And that's what I use for a lot of the transformative women's leadership programs that I run as well. I use a lot of the psychotherapy there.
So my next question is around, how we as a country sort of compare with global benchmarks. And with India sort of producing almost 43% of STEM graduates where
Yeah.
women are there, and then that leads to translates into, as you said, 38% of women in tech force, and then sort of goes to 10 to 15% in leadership. And when we compare that to US, it's like 36% STEM graduates, which are women, and then 22% in leadership.
Yeah.
Right. So, how do you think India's innovation landscape compares to global benchmarks? And which areas specifically do you think, like AI, UI, UX design, where India can actually lead, especially when it comes to underrepresented talent?
Yeah. So if you look at the numbers, AI representation is very low, right? It's 30 something percent women in AI. There's a massive scope there and a potential there. There's a lot of scope and potential in design thinking, in products. There's a lot of grassroots level intersection that we can bring in because India has a lot of interesting complex variables, right? The more complex your variables that you create for, look at Swiggy, look at Dunzo, look at a lot of these unicorns that are very specific to India, right? There's so much scope and potential. And the talent in India is ripe, it's brimming because there's in terms of the way we learn, the way we apply, all of that are parameters that work for us. But I think the barriers come in when, like I said, the societal structures or the conditional requirements of what is expected out of gender in our country sort of become, a barrier to entry at the mid level or the scale up level because people are happy where they're at and they don't want to take on more simply because you're already overloading them with something that's going on in their personal lives. So if you were to look at the professional divide, there is more of a professional divide. That's why you'll see higher numbers in leadership, whereas there are lower entry numbers in the US and other countries, right? For us, I think it's to keep them locked on that journey. They start out and then they fall off. How can we really keep them engaged? How can we really build that number? How can we impact that number to stay on, to step up, to grow, to scale? Because the minute the economy is well equipped, and if you look at the women representation in the workforce, there's a direct impact on GDP.
Yes.
Right? There is a direct impact on more women finding employment because then you'll have daycares, nannies, crashes, cooks. There's an entire second layer of employment that's created when you have women going to work. So when you look at all of these parameters, I think India has massive promise. But because we are so disorganized and we're so, as a country, we're in so many places, we're grappling with so much. I think there needs to be a concerted effort across academia and organizations and communities like ours for us to really push and to also equip women with the need to want to invest in themselves and grow. I think my biggest struggle is that.
Yeah, I think if I sort of connect all of the conversation that we had today, the entire patriarchal society sort of conditioning women to, let's say, be wanting to be primary caregivers, and if we sort of weave it together with the timeline that a woman has, so entry is higher into the workforce, but as they approach a time where they could actually be part of the leadership, they start envisioning themselves as something else. And so by that time the representation sort of falls off, and then they're not able to sort of really go to the leadership positions. And so I think programs like Return to Work that was there last year really
we have
help
another
in
one this
bridging-
year as well.
that would really help in bridging that gap where women want to get back into the industry. And then again pursue their way to be in the leadership position.
Absolutely. And also when you look at rural India, when you look at, and like the joke is there's an India and then there's Bharat. The kind of talent that's available. Tier 2, Tier 3 cities today have so much potential. It's brimming, right? Technology is everywhere. Everybody is trying to problem solve. So the opportunities are aplenty. Now we need a push to have more representation. And I think that is the gap that we're probably dealing with right now. That's why allyship becomes so important. Allyship at home and allyship at work, both equally.
Australia's next wave, Women in Tech, focuses on career transitions, and Germany has also seen progress due to mandatory quotas for leadership boards. Do you think policies can help India have more representations in leadership? Where do you see there are gaps, and which kind of policies do you think precisely that can be targeted?
I think policies make a huge difference because then there is a mandated requirement.
Yes.
And when you mandate something, it automatically becomes powerful. But what you mandate is also important. Like the RG car incident, right? When you ask women to step back from roles that they can play by putting them in boxes and saying you can only work from this time to this time, you're not solving for the problem, right? You're reducing or eliminating the problem from happening, but you're not solving for the real issue. The real issue is
Yeah.
safety at the workplace,
Yeah.
right? So that's a band-aid fix to say don't show up after an X amount of time. I always believe in empowering the person with the choice, one, with the safety that they need to work at whatever the time that they want to work at. It's our prerogative to create safe workplaces. I think perceptually, even today, I know for a fact that to send students from Kochi to Bangalore, from smaller towns to Bangalore, there is such a fear.
Yeah.
And that fear sort of also doesn't really help a lot of these young girls from accessing platforms that they would like to. I have heard stories where women in audiences have cried because they're not given permission to go do a hackathon, right? So there is a very, very systemic issue at the
It
grassroots
is, yeah.
level, right? So there is that. Then there are all of the other issues of coming into the workplace, then judgment, then bias, then, all of these other layers that get added on, which all sort of then pile up to become this mammoth issue. But how do you destabilize that? You destabilize that by creating policy and advocacy that is meant for the people that it's being created for. You look at AI, look at the use of AI, look at the bias in AI today. There's such deep seated issues, and we need policies there. We need governance there, and there isn't enough. Right? So it's across all of these segments in these areas. And it's also psychological, it's also organizational behavior. It's so many of these. And to really change that narrative, the work is at the academic level, at the college level, at the organization. It's pervasive. The government, the public, the private, all of it has to come together to really make this remark change move. Make it a movement. Make it, something that takes over and spills over and makes that change happen. It's happening, but it's happening in very small pockets. We see a little bit of change happen in privileged circles, and we're like, no, the world is changing. No, the world is not changing. Right? Go 5 kilometers out of Delhi towards a Haryana, and then see what the world
It's very
looks there.
different.
It's very different, right? So we think that progress is happening, but it's happening in such small pockets, and we're delusional to think that that is the reality, which is not, because that's happening in a micro minuscule privileged circle space. And we are privileged to be able to be doing this. How many people speak the language? How many people have the access? How many people have learned it? It's just, and English is very debilitating that way because it doesn't give everybody a seat at the table, because language becomes the first barrier, right? So we're talking about still being stuck with that. So imagine the leaps we have to take to get there. The 7,500 people that make it to a Grace Hopper, there's potential for Grace Hopper to happen in every city with 7,500 people.
Mm-hmm.
But how far and how long is it going to take for us to get there? The women that are there, the some of them that take power into their hands and say, I'm going to do this, I'm going to work, I'm going to study, I'm going to invest, those are the ones that are changing the landscape. And those are few. So we need to have more and more and more of those.
And also, like, I think with COVID, we saw this trend post COVID that, companies were working remotely. A lot of people who had migrated into the city sort of went back to their homes, in the tier 2 cities. And we see a lot of development in those cities now, because now those people are there and they need those facilities. And so I think that has created a little foundation for that mindset to go back.
Yeah.
And maybe, we can build on that.
Yeah, policy leads to infrastructure. Infrastructure leads to, better functional systems. That leads to better access. So it's all deeply interlinked. And when you solve for one, you start slowly sort of solving for the other pieces of the puzzle as well.
When we talk about product innovation, we think about Silicon Valley, cutting edge labs, a lot of deep tech work getting done. But innovation in India is very different.
Yeah.
It's sort of very frugal, scalable solutions, very mass audience, created for a mass audience that's cost
Yeah.
sensitive.
Yeah.
So, how do you see product innovation shaping up in India with the kind of diversity it has? And how do you think women, when they come into leadership positions for these kind of innovative solutions, can lead deep tech in India?
I will ask you to think about ISRO and the
Mhm.
women at ISRO who made the
Yeah.
launch happen,
Mhm.
right? So when you think of it, the first rocket that was launched in India in Sri Perumbudur was carried there by bullock carts. That's innovation in India,
Yeah.
right? Innovation in India is that Paytm link that you will find when a coconut vendor standing on the side of a road on some highway in obscurity who you're able to pay online,
Yeah.
right? Innovation does not have to be in the fancy labs, right? It can be grassroots. And there is proof to show that grassroots innovation, which solves for problems real time at the village level, at the Gram Panchayat level, is happening. Right, and you have Padman as an example. You have many such examples of, but they're very few that you hear of. But there are so many, right? Transformative change and access to wealth can happen when you're able to really see how somebody can invest in their personal journey as they're solving for the larger problem and the complexity of it, and then who they bring along the way, the collaborations that they unlock, the partnerships that they unlock, the stories that they're able to tell, the people that they hire. All of this plays a role, and I think that's innovation, not the fancy world of innovation that we're pointed, but innovation on the go, innovation on the fly, and that makes a difference.
So the world of work is changing rapidly. As AI is reshaping work, the way we see our workforce is also changing. So, what is one trend in workforce that you see will go mainstream in the next 12 months, especially with AI coming into picture?
Learning about AI is
Mhm.
the first step, right? Because AI is not replacing jobs. AI is replacing jobs of people that don't know how to work with AI.
Mhm.
I think that's a primary difference. We've been saying, oh, AI is taking away jobs. No, AI is creating jobs, but you need to learn to work with the technology that is in the present moment for you to be able to find ways to equip yourself with the awareness of what that looks like. Right? There are so many futuristic career opportunities that are opening up. So I think it's more around how we define it, because the problem statement is not AI is taking away jobs. The problem statement is, do we have enough people who are well equipped and understand AI to build the world of AI for the future?
Mhm.
Right? So reframing that in some form, and then also understanding that workplaces will look different. When technology came about, what did we say? Tech is going to take away the jobs.
Mhm.
But tech didn't take away jobs. It changed the job landscape. It changed the way manufacturing was. It changed, you take any industry, technology has impacted it in a powerful way. There are so many advancements that have happened today because of that. So I believe in not resisting, but going with the flow. And I believe that AI is the flow of the moment, right? We've seen multiple technologies come and go, but nothing as pervasive as AI, because now is that next wave that's coming up. What we need is more conscientious businesses. What we need is more conscious businesses. What we need is more collaboration and community and the ability to drive this change from a very grassroots level thinking. And that requires all of us to focus on a future that is invested in like that. But when we are grappling with a lot of the world powers doing what they're doing, you really don't have the frame of mind or reference to really go after what's collaborative or, what's conscious, because you're grappling with the moment on, oh, this is what my business is dealing with as a problem.
Yeah, I think overall, I just feel that when we talk about AI replacing jobs and everything, it's all around what problem are we solving right now. I think the scope of those problems will expand
Absolutely.
many-fold. So the companies won't just be solving the problems they're solving now. With the power of the AI, they can solve something greater,
Yeah.
and with that, more people will still be needed. So I think I totally agree with that. And with that, my question around the next question is around the responsible AI.
Yes.
And you're a big believer in that, and especially with technology representing the people that it is built for,
Yeah.
right? So, how can India's tech sector ensure the diversity in AI development and make sure that the social biases that exist in the world today do not exist tomorrow?
So I think one is machine learning, right? Let's learn from where AI is learning. AI can't be responsible. AI is neutral factor. It's, whether it's generative or agentic. The fact is AI is a crafted entity. People who are using AI are the ones that have to be ethical and responsible. It's like a knife, right? The person who holds the knife decides what you're going to do with it. Are you going to cut vegetables with it, or are you going to use it for harm? It's the same with guns, right?
Yeah.
So I think ethical and responsible AI has to be deeply intrinsic to the people who are using AI. And for data, already AI is biased deeply because it's learned from the machines that it's learned from, the machine learning that's happened, the data sets are already flawed.
Yeah.
Because they're not neutral. Data sets have deep-seated biases, and AI has picked up on those biases. And you'll see a zillion examples of this, right? Of AI, sort of right from race to gender to all of these. There are multiple parameters of AI that perpetuate the world in very problematic ways right now. And the only way to neutralize it is, again, representation. The more people that you have building AI for the future, with more voices involved in that, who recognize it and neutralize the data sets by interference sets. I call them interference sets. The idea of leveraging interference sets to interfere with the bias and really plant it in such a manner that the bias is neutralized before it even becomes a perpetuating problem, which is, it's too late for that already, but we need to go back and fix that. Because until we fix that, all of these issues are going to come up. And unfortunately, because it's not so well manned, it's going to create more problems.
I mean, as you said, that ethics and responsibility cannot be just put on AI. It ultimately falls down to the user of AI.
Or the builder.
Or the builder of AI. So, do you think governance point of view, something needs to come up for this?
Absolutely. Deep governance needs to be established, especially for the way AI is being used for so many tasks that could have long-standing implications on how gender, race, there are so many, the politics of it is huge. And we've not started recognizing the scale of the problems that could happen if we don't intervene right now, right? It's already happening around us. And it's right now, it's in small echo chambers because it's not taken on. But imagine if we don't fix it now, the scale of the problems that could potentially arise at a point when AI is taking decisions, AI is taking those calls. It's going to be, and we're already seeing bits and pieces of it, very, very real, very, very stark.
If you weren't working in inclusive leadership, tech, and diversity, what unexpected career would you pick up?
I think I'm leaning more and more towards dance and therapy.
Oh, wow. I love dance.
Yeah, same here. So I think I could envision a total career in dance for me as a parallel alternative. There are many. I could be a writer, and so there are a lot of my favorite interests that I've parked on the side because there's so much of me is consumed here. But I think I would lean into all of those.
So, what is one mantra that defines your work?
I think showing up for my team, showing up for people, showing up for the community, just that. Show up.
Do you have a recommendation for a book or a podcast that you want women leaders to go through?
There is this beautiful book by Bell Hooks called All About Love. And I think it's a powerful reframing of what that looks like. And I think that's a great recommendation, at least in the here and now, that I have for everybody.
So if equity could trend online, what hashtag would you coin for it?
Equitable by nature, because the planet is so equitable.
That's beautiful.
Equitable by nature, because nature nurtures equitably, beautifully.
What's one common myth that people have about inclusion?
That it needs to be controlled. Doesn't. The more freer, the more independent, the more unbound it is, the more it'll lean into beauty.
One message to every woman who's thinking of entering into tech?
I think technology is powerful as a way to really invest in a career. And I think there are so many ways technology is transformative. And I think the role as a woman in tech is so, so great as a space to hold on to. It's something that women should seek because science, technology, engineering, math, all of it is for everybody and it has nothing to do with gender. And I think women in tech are fantastic at creating and breaking those barriers that exist.
What's one leadership skill that the next generation needs to master?
There's a bit of a struggle with that, but showing up for themselves, showing up for their professional world, showing up for the tasks that they have, and just being there present, fully present to it is, I think, one skill that will really help go a long way.
What is one tech tool that you use in your everyday life and that's your go to?
Actually, it's interesting. I use a lot of the AI tools only to check for ethics.
Mhm.
Like it's mostly my play with, oh, can we test this
Which is your favorite
platform?
at this point?
Actually, don't have a favorite because I've checked Perplexity, Copilot, ChatGPT. Sort of, in on all of these, I've only tested them for ethics. So I don't use AI tools for my everyday. But if I were to go, I think I do use, funnily enough, the Google Suite becomes
Yeah, Google Workspace, yeah, and then Gemini.
Google Workspace. And I don't use Gemini that much. Again, like I said, AI is limited in usage. It's only to test, right? But I think the Google world of a lot of the applications and the Microsoft world is what I end up using the most because of the work.
What
that I
is
do.
one fascinating application of AI that you have come across in the past month?
I think in terms of leveraging AI to neutralize the very data sets, if you can ask AI what is missing or why are you biased, that depending on the prompt engineering piece is so beautiful, right? Because it's going back and it's leaning into. So AI is able to pick up because there are articles around bias, but until you ask it, it doesn't. So what you ask of AI is a defining moment in what AI gives you. So I think that is fascinating because if you know what to look for, AI's got it. It's just that it's not thinking because you're making it think. So what you do with AI is a lot more powerful than what AI can do for you.
Okay, so with that, we've come to a end for our podcast for today, and it was amazing to meet you, Shreya.
Lovely to meet you too, Shreya. Build with Shreya is such a beautiful space. Congratulations on the beautiful conversations you're having. Looking forward to having you and your entire community come join us at the Grace Hopper celebration.
So, with that, we have come to the end of our podcast for today, where we learned how inclusivity, equity, and diverse voices can play a key role in product innovation and the outcomes it is creating for our organizations. So, let's keep that at the top of our mind till the next time. See you then.